We are very excited to have you joining in on our NGO Leaders webinar on prevention of violence against children in East Africa, where we're focusing on evidence generation and use. We are very delighted to have you and your organization. Thank you for joining us as we kickstart deliberations and learning around the relevance of evidence generation and use in child protection programming and overall institutional growth. So this is our very first of our series of webinars for leaders of organizations that are involved in child protection work. And it has been convened by the VACNet's Virtual Hub, which is a project of Impact and Innovations Development Center. We are a technical assistance organization that supports non-profit organizations to develop and implement programs that are effective and sustainable. And while we're at it, we use a learning-centered approach to maximize the impact of development programs. That is who we are at Impact and Innovation Development Center. My name is Flavia Naluvega, and I am the technical advisor in charge of documentation and communication at Impact and Innovation Development Center. And I will be your moderator for today. Friends, colleagues, you will agree with me that if we make efforts to document evidence on violence against children and shelve it, then surely it is as good as useless. It is as good as witnessing violence and not taking action. So we need to take deliberate and informed steps to ensure that information that is generated is put to use if we are to achieve an end to violence against children in the world. So we are here to inspire each other, friends, and to take action with the information we have at hand, and information we are going to probably get today. We have a number of colleagues and friends who have registered for this webinar, close to 170 participants who we are expecting from Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. But we are also excited to note that we actually have stakeholders joining us beyond East Africa. They've joined us from South Africa and across, and we also have funding partners and other implementing partners on board. Welcome, friends, welcome, colleagues, to this space. Thank you so much for joining in. Your attendance in such big numbers is confirmation and confidence to us that we are on the right track towards preventing violence against children. And we are very excited. We pray that this discussion will add value to the sector, child protection. You know that one by one makes a band of friends. So to shortly start us off shall be our friend and colleague, Agnes Wasike, who is the technical advisor, knowledge management at Impact and Innovations Development. And she also doubles as the coordinator for our VACNet's Virtual Hub. Welcome with me, Agnes Wasike, who is going to be giving us an overview on our hub and benefits to organizations intervening in violence against children. Agnes, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Flavia. We are delighted that this day has come. I'm going to be briefly giving an overview of VACNet's Virtual Hub, particularly for the benefit of those probably who are learning about the hub for the very first time, but also for those that have heard about the hub, it will help provide more clarity on what the hub is all about. The hub is an innovation by Impact and Innovations Development Center that was set up in March 2022. It's 1 year, close to 1 year now, and it serves as an online space that is able to receive evidence on what is working in prevention of violence against children. Let me call it a one-stop shop as a central repository And the hub sources existing evidence that is generated from program work and research processes. The hub receives a wide range of evidence. We recognize that we need to nurture indigenous knowledge, and therefore we receive evidence that is both less scientific, but also evidence that has been generated through rigorous methodologies. It can be written, it can be video, all that evidence, the hub receives it. What I need to clarify is that the hub is not the sole generator, does not generate evidence. We work with what has already been generated by those that are doing program implementation in prevention of violence against children, and those that are doing research work around interventions that have been implemented. And while we receive this evidence, we try to work on it in terms of summarizing it, but we do not synthesize it in terms of reanalyzing your results or findings and not generating our own conclusions. Whatever information we use is that which you have provided. And this hub in the evidence space of violence against children in the region comes in as a complementary kind of platform for sharing this evidence rather than a competitor. And therefore the hub does not in any way put ownership on the evidence that is uploaded. The evidence is designed and bears the information of the source organization, the contact details, and the acknowledgements. As we work through this hub and invite you as stakeholders in the region, our promise in the medium term is really around 3 areas that we would like to work with. Collecting the evidence across the 3 countries and having it in this one place. Summarizing the evidence that is easy for uptake, because you'll agree with me that an evaluation report or a write-up which is more than 15 pages will be difficult for anybody to read. And then providing a platform, space such as what we are having now, for discussion on the emerging evidence. Our approach for now, we are looking at basically a dual approach, partnerships across the continuum of the scope of evidence work that we are looking at, partnerships around collecting this evidence, around documenting it in terms of those summaries, around sharing this evidence. So if you're out there and you can partner with us in any of these 3 areas, we would be delighted. We also have the approach of technical assistance. For those who say evidence generation and use is a good thing, but we do not know how to go about it, then we can have a discussion with you and see how IIDC through the hub can be able to walk with you this journey so that we have evidence generated from your violence against children prevention work, is documented and is shared out. As I conclude, I wanted to bring to light the benefits of organizations intervening in violence against children prevention, connecting with this hub. The hub will give visibility to your evidence to a global audience because it's open for access and there will be many people coming in to check on the resources. So there is that assurance. And by connecting with the hub, you know that your organizational evidence that you share will have a leading legacy because it's out there, widely shared, and always be referred to than when it is confined in your spaces that are purely organizational. And you will be able to keep up to date with emerging evidence as we keep uploading it on the hub, but also easy access to any new models, resources, and tools around prevention of violence against children. Colleagues, as I end, I'd like to share words of wisdom from Carl Pearson, who said that which is measured improves, and that which is measured and reported improves exponentially. Kindly measure your violence against children prevention work, but also report it through sharing with the wider audience through Vackness Virtual Hub. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnes. An upload and a virtual upload for Agnes. Thank you very much. Colleagues, now we all know where to go. If we are looking for well-researched, well-documented evidence that we can actually use and emulate in our day-to-day work in the journey of preventing violence against children. Thank you very much, Agnes. We welcome you to join and visit the Vackness Virtual Hub, and also follow the hub on all the social media pages so that you get updated information. Our next speakers are going to be from Kenya Medical Research Institute. We have Professor Jennifer Ora and Miss Lillian Maeka. Professor Jennifer is the boss to our other lead speaker, who is Lillian Maeka. Miss Maeka is a senior research scientist at KEMRI, that is Kenya Medical Research Institute, with over 10 years experience in health research, both quantitative and qualitative research. Lillian is a certified knowledge manager through the Knowledge Management Academy Institute in Vienna, Austria, and research evidence synthesis specialist.
Thank you so much. We most appreciate, and we are really excited for this invitation to allow KEMRI to share all our work in the generation of evidence. I will just give a brief on the Kenya Medical Research Institute, then the guest speaker, who is Lillian, will continue to give a little bit more details in evidence. So the topic today, as you have, you can see on the screen, and you have actually alluded to it, is the relevance of evidence generation and use in institutional growth. So as I said before I hand it over to Lillian, you will just allow me to introduce KEMRI, because KEMRI is really the source of evidence generation. So the need to inform policy through research and evidence was realized all the way back in 2006 as the Regional East African Community Health Priority Initiative. This was the REACH PI. Those who are with us then must have known it, and it involved both Kenya, hosted at the KEMRI, Kenya Medical Research Institute. In Uganda, it was hosted at Makerere University, and in Tanzania, we had it at NIMRI. So this initiative was adopted in 2006 to help research evidence be realized. It's good to say that in Uganda, the initiative really flourished into the African Center for Meta-Analysis. My Ugandan colleagues will allude to that, and they are doing very well. In Kenya, we kind of went into a lull with this initiative, but eventually it was rejuvenated as the resource development and knowledge management, now where we are actually carrying out the activities of knowledge management. So KEMRI is a state corporation which was established in 1979 under the Science and Technology Act. And our main mandate, it is actually a national body responsible for carrying out research in human health in Kenya. And of course, human health is wide. because now the topic of focus today is actually on violence against children. And this violence, we know it does affect the health of our children, both mentally and physically. So indeed, KEMRI has the mandate and responsibility to carry out research for human health. In a nutshell, to put it simply, we exist to find solutions to the public health problems. And this, we actually do it through conducting high quality research that informs evidence-based policy. We do translate our research into best practices. And of course, to be able to use the research and also produce quality research, there is need for capacity building. The human resource skills is very essential. So to motivate decision makers to use evidence, because we could be creating a lot of evidence, generating a lot of it, and as we heard earlier, unless it is used, it will be useless. So it is also our mandate to ensure that we promote the use of evidence in decision making by doing a lot of discussions with the policy makers, having policy dialogues, having symposia like these ones, so that we can encourage our evidence use. Next slide, please. So for efficiency and effectiveness in the evidence space, the Kenya Medical Research Institute saw it as an advantage to have a unit which they call Resource Development and Knowledge Management. We normally just call it Knowledge Management Department, KM. And this department is there actually to establish the structures that are able to strengthen institutional capacity for evidence synthesis, to promote evidence-informed decision-making in health. This is particular because KEMRI realized that researchers produce too much information, but this hardly reaches those who need it. And who needs evidence? We have the policymakers, we have the health managers, the service providers, and even the general public do need evidence. So knowledge management here focuses on ensuring that the evidence generated in the institution through research reaches those who need it. Next slide, please. So simply, what is really knowledge? Knowledge is actually at some stage, it starts with the data, the production of data. You know, all of us produce data as we are doing research. I know the VAC group, you have just indicated that you use data and quality information. So in order to come up with knowledge, we need to have data, which is just individual facts, figures, signals and measurements. And this is actually raw data on what, who, how, and where something can be found. So this data is normally organized and structured to give us information. So information is really just data that has been given some kind of meaning by putting it into constants to provide a story that has some meaning. It is information is data processed, and it deals with the way data can be related to information. So from information, this is just illustrating the hierarchy of data to information to knowledge to wisdom. So from information, knowledge is information that has been culturally understood. We must know, we must have an idea, a concept, synthesized, compared, and thought out well. so that we are able to model something useful out of the research we get from the data and get information, and then we have that knowledge. We give it a meaning. And it's important to note that without information, you cannot never have knowledge. So as researchers in KEMRI, we go from producing data, giving it a context into information, giving it a meaning, and then finally, we must be able to understand and integrate all that has been accumulated into decision-making process. So we do have actually two different types of knowledge. There is one which we can extract. There is one from the tacit knowledge, which our skilled persons, experienced persons have, and those who have a lot of wisdom. There are already those which have been documented, as we are encouraging us here, that we need to document every information. So there is also that knowledge that is documented. So both types of knowledge are useful. So in order to use information to add value, knowledge must be generated and managed. So what kind of value are we talking about here? Sometimes we need this information to help us increase our productivity. It also can help us to give better customer service and also improve our business processes and products. So managing knowledge actually involves the creation, dissemination, and utilization of knowledge. And this is important because we are able now to improve the flow of information around the organization. We make evidence accessible and available. Hence, we are able to promote evidence use for making decisions. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Here I will only give an example of some relevant to our topic today, an example of promotion of evidence use. This I found in a resolution of the World Health Assembly, where it was stated that in preventing and responding to violence against children, evidence is required. And this evidence must be provided by monitoring the magnitude and characteristics of violence against children, so that we know and is able to advise appropriately. Also, this evidence can be produced by maintaining an electronic information system that summarizes the scientific data on the burden, risk, factors, and consequences of violence against children and the evidence of its preventability. And I believe this must be available in our databases. Also, developing and disseminating evidence-based technique, guidance, documents, norms and standards for preventing and responding to violence against children. Once all this evidence is available, we must be able to implement evidence-based prevention and response to strategies. Finally, yes, I was interested in this. An advocacy brief recently published, as recent as this month, 2013. This advocacy brief identified challenges in responding to violence against children as lack of awareness about laws and policies, which we should encourage, weak enforcement of the laws, the low reporting rates, and inadequate data collection. And I finalize this by saying evidence-informed decision-making requires that all the actors, the creators of evidence, the users, have access to evidence and are empowered to act on that evidence. And I thank you very much, because this is actually what you are doing.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for a very detailed presentation and giving us a detailed brief about KEMRI and what you do. Very interesting to know that it's the national body that does research on human health in Kenya. I mean, we are dealing with big people here, so we are dealing with believability in well-researched evidence and evidence use. So we really appreciate you for giving us a proper brief about KEMRI and what you do and giving us knowledge about evidence generation and use. So we shall get the more detailed relevance of evidence generation and use for institutional growth from our colleague Lillian, still from KEMRI. Welcome, Lillian.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here this afternoon. I'll just go direct into my presentation. I'm actually going to tackle the technical bit after the overview that's been given on the specificities of evidence. Evidence refers to reliable and accurate facts that an organization like VACNET can use to support sound decisions in developing and implementing or evaluating policies. And that is what we do mostly here in KEMRI. We do our research, we come up with evidence, and we try to translate this evidence into action through knowledge translation. And this whole process is called evidence-informed decision-making. And this evidence can be either in-source or externally sourced. By this, I mean we can be able to get the source from other institutions, what they've done and what we've also done, and then we bring all that together to answer a particular question. In evidence-informed decision-making, the evidence that is generated is the one that is translated into actionable outputs as a result of that single evidence that was identified. So for this evidence to be actioned, it has to be synthesized. And one thing I heard when Agnes was giving her talk, she said that you use evidence as is. Once you receive the evidence, you just summarize and use it. We'll go into details on maybe the pros and cons of that, because once you get evidence, you really have to review that evidence to remove any biases, which is a very rigorous process. And the methodology is kind of long than just doing the summary. So evidence synthesis refers to a method that allows researchers to bring together all the relevant information on a particular question. And in this process, you'll be able to identify gaps, establish the basis of the evidence, and see which one gives you the best practice guidance. And when you look at my slide, you'll see that the diagram there, just trying to describe what the authors do. Just the slide before you move, please. Previous slide. Yeah. When you look at that green-yellow diagram there, I was just trying to give an overview on how this evidence is synthesized. You get all the pieces of evidence, the publications that have been generated. You put all of them together and be able to systematically analyze them to give you some output. As you conduct the evidence synthesis, there are some principles that should be put in mind. A good evidence synthesis should be inclusive, transparent, and rigorous. Inclusive in the fact that you involve all the stakeholders. Okay, I really tried to simplify the steps of evidence synthesis, and I really, based on the type of, because I come from a research background where we are so technical with our words. So the first step is trying to come up with a question, identifying the problem. Once you identify the problem in the field, what is this question that you want to answer? Or from the evidence or the pieces of work that has been done in your area, bring them all together and come up with a question from the pieces of work that you've seen and try to answer that question. And this question normally comes from the research that has been done. And then you try to acquire the more information regarding that will help you to answer the question through a systematic search, where you try to search for different types of evidences that have addressed a particular issue, a similar issue, not a particular, but a similar issue. And these different evidences will be able to help you collect different ideas on how to respond to these. Critically appraise or judge the trustworthiness of the evidence through appraising. It's normally called the appraisal process. And then we aggregate, trying to pull together and weighing the evidences, seeing which one is best and which one is not the best to use. Because remember, in evidence synthesis, we are trying to use the best available evidence. So you apply that evidence by incorporating the evidence into the decision-making process. And as I said, involve all the stakeholders from start to the end. Because if you don't involve, in most cases, we don't involve the policymakers. We look for them towards the end of the work, and it's normally very difficult. Involve them from the word go, because when applying, it's majorly the policymakers who are needed to support on how to do this. And they can only support if you've involved them from the word go. Eventually assess or evaluate the outcome of the decisions. How is the application of this evidence? Is it productive, or was it just a waste of funding that we had used in that process? Okay, searching for evidence. This is a diagram that shows us a pyramid for the evidence search process. And in this pyramid, you see that we have different types of evidences. From the lowest part of this pyramid, you see that you have the background information and expert opinion. We have the research articles and then the evidence guidelines. As you move upwards, the evidence becomes, the quality of the evidence improves, because when you look at down there, this evidence still has got so many gaps. There's a lot of biases, but as you move upwards from evidence guidelines, evidence summaries, and systematic reviews, there's removal of biases, making the evidence more authentic, more reusable, and clearly that type of evidence will be more productive. So this is just in a nutshell, the different types of evidences that we have and their quality. From that, the previous graph, we've seen that systematic reviews normally gives the best quality of evidence because of the nature of work that has been put into it. It's normally a very rigorous process, and at the end of it all, you find that a lot of biases have been removed, because generally when you're doing a research, there are a lot of interference. There are tendency for biases from the researchers or from whoever is handling the work. And then there's also just the natural interference into the research that normally brings about that bias. But when you look at systematic reviews, a lot of biases have been removed, and it's the best quality of evidence that can be used to apply or to translate it into actionable activities. So I found 3 good quality evidences. The first one was the prevalence and risk of violence against children. And I see that in that publication, the evidence confirmed that the children with disabilities are more likely to be victims of violence than are their peers who are not disabled. I looked at the Bridging the Gaps, a global review. It's not a systematic review, but it's a global review, which gave quite a number of conclusions regarding the social norms. So these are a very interesting cycle slide. And this was work done by Graham Logan. I'm sure if you're in the knowledge management space, you know about this knowledge to action framework. As we started, we had that, I think it was Agnes who said, evidence is nothing if you don't have any actions from them or any outputs from them. And the only way you can put this evidence into practice is through knowledge translation, translating this evidence into action. And this cycle tries to give us just the different stages. It's like a summary of all that you've been talking about. With sufficient evidence, knowledge is ready to be moved into action. And when you look at let me start with the outer cycle, the bottom part, where we talk about identifying the problem, because that's where always the starting point. You first of all have to identify a problem. And by identifying a problem, you'll be able to map your goal on how you want to reach the end of tackling of this problem. And when you're identifying the problem, you'll be able to come up with the no-do gaps. And this is the stage whereby you try to identify the no-do gaps, look for the relevant sources of evidence that can help you to answer that answer that question or problem that you have identified. Once you've done your synthesis, this is actually describing the synthesis stage, where you bring all the evidence together, come up with the answer. And then try and adapt the knowledge to the local context. Because in most cases, you'll find that, since you're basing your findings in multiple sources, what has worked in Kenya might not work in Uganda. What has worked in the US might not work in Kenya. So you have to contextualize the knowledge that you've generated from that evidence. Put it in your local context because you want to solve local problems. As you do that, you also assess the barriers and facilitators to this knowledge use. Once you identify the barriers and facilitators, you'll be able to move swiftly. And as we move, I believe you're seeing why it is important to involve all the stakeholders from start to the end. Because even in the barriers are facilitated, some of those stakeholders are part of the barriers. And if you involve them from the start, you'll be able to identify them as a barrier and you might just change them because knowledge translation has to do with behavior change. You might, or even thought process change. That might be able to be helpful in implementing your knowledge findings. The next thing is to select or implement the intervention. And in most cases, we find implementation being the biggest issue. For us, that is a very big problem. We normally struggle with implementing. We do the research so well, but the implementation normally needs a lot of advocacy. And by implementation, I'm just saying making the knowledge usable and more likely to be applied. Because you have to bring all the, this is where now you bring the actual policy makers to play. The ministry, for us, it's the Ministry of Health that normally support us with implementation. Once you've implemented, the monitoring of the knowledge. How is it doing? Or how is the progress as you move on? Evaluate the outcome. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to go through all this work that you've done? Was it worth it to put in all these resources, all the funding that you got into the work that you've been doing? Is the outcome productive? And then also think about the sustainability. And when you look at the inward, the inverted triangle, it's about the knowledge synthesis. Remember, for you to be able to come up, you have to do what? To synthesize the work. Remove all the principles of synthesis, we've gone through them. So you have to put all that in there for you to be able to come up with productive outputs as you work around it. And as it was well put earlier, if knowledge is not put in practice, then we are good at doing zero work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lillian. That was a very detailed presentation and proper guidance on how we can get the best, generate best evidence, but also how to put it to use. I actually liked your concluding remark on how to put the evidence we generate to use. You've not only guided those who are joining in on the webinar, but you've also guided IIDC on, how best we can carry forward the evidence we generate. Thank you very much, Lillian, and thank you very much for sharing with us this great information. We shall now open up to the next session, which is the question and answer. We have not received any major questions in our Q&A section within the back end of the webinar. But just in case you have any questions that are rising, kindly unmute and speak out. We have about 3 minutes for this, 2 to 3 minutes. We shall kindly request that you give us at least 2 to 3 minutes to just listen in to colleagues so that we do not miss out on any questions that may be arising. Over to you, Moses, who is chairing this session.
Now, my work is simple, and I've been introduced my designation here. I head programs at IIDC. And we would like to open now opportunity to people to give their views, to ask questions, to make remarks in regard to the topic of today. We know that your microphones have actually been already open, and you're free to be in position at your end to present your view or to ask your questions. Others also who cannot speak, I think it's also open for you to put whatever question you have on the chat, and we will be able to look at that. So this is now the opportunity to do that, and anybody can be able to start. Hello, we can hear you.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Moses and Professor and Lillian for presentation on the topic at end and the evidence in generation of data. And I think it's an eye-opening presentation. So I just wanted to get the reflection of a professor, because it's one way methodological to generate evidence, data, information, but also it's becoming also so difficult because the perpetrators of violence against children are the really persons that we consider are very close family members or people at a decision making at school level. And you may be missing some of those information from the really perpetrators. So doing what you are doing, and given the sensitivity of some of the evidence, what need to be done for us to be able to collect those data in a way that is appropriate, but also in a way that would also prevent continuation of violence against the children. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that question. And I would love to get maybe a couple of other questions, like 3. Then we maybe give opportunity for Professor and Lillian to respond to. Yeah, you've got that. Another question? Feel free to open your microphone and then you can put your questions forward.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
This is Vicky. My name is Vicky Chanamo from Save the Children, Uganda.
Be close to your microphone so we can get you closer. We missed to hear your names.
So the question of violence, one of the key findings in one of our ongoing studies that we looked through was the parents, the community members expressed that there are cases where they report situation on violence against children, and because of the high corruption, actually came in the finding that corruption by the police authorities. And so their cases are not responded to, are not attended to, are delayed to be addressed. At this point, I just want to understand, sorry I came late a bit, I want to understand the balance between this kind of evidence, flagging it to the responsible people, and then how do we ensure advocacy is integrated? Because this seems to be a more political, but also looking at the government structure or system, but requires advocacy. So how do you strike a balance to make sure the team clearly differentiates between advocacy, things that needs to be done and implemented either internally with other partners, but things that require high advocacy? I'm just trying to think through and see how we can balance that.
Thank you, Vicky. Anybody online?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. We can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
My name is Gloria. I'm the Children Agenda Forum coordinator in Kenya. I appreciate the idea we have in mind on using evidence generation to get solutions or to help us in policy making. But my question at this point, Lillian raised the issue of stated that implementation is actually our main problem, because we can get all the knowledge and then nothing can be done. So I'd like to ask Lillian, how can she advise us to actually ensure that the data that is collected, the evidence that we get is actually implemented? Because that is actually a very big problem we are facing.
All right. Is there anybody else I could give additional one question? And then I can give the microphone to Lillian and then Professor Jennifer to respond.
Yeah,
Lillian,
thank you very
can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. And I'll go straight to the question regarding implementation, because I know it's something that affects all of us so much. We've also been in that situation whereby we've done a lot of research, but once the implementation is done, we do the reports to the funders, the ministry, be it outside there, and then we close the project without seeing what seeing the output of the project. But one thing that we've really tried to do as a prof has just alluded is the inclusivity. I think there are a few of our work that has been done. I'll just use our example, what we've tried and has worked. There are some projects that we've involved from scratch, from protocol development, where we have developed the proposal. We've tried to involve the Ministry of Health. Okay, I'll talk of the Ministry of Health because those are our main policymakers. They are our key stakeholders. And for us to have anything implemented, we have to go to them. So the best ever implemented project on our end was one that's where we involved the MOH team from the word go. And the good thing is that you are working with the policy office, the research and policy office. And it was something that really helped us because apart from that, we were able to do a bit of advocacy whereby we did the project, got the outputs, and even held some webinars just to disseminate and maybe do some advocacy regarding our findings on how we want this implemented, and the ministry coming in and supporting us to do that. So the main thing is inclusivity. I know it is not easy. It is not easy even with the inclusivity, but persistence, just doing that persistently might be helpful. Yeah, for us, inclusivity and a bit of advocacy worked for a few of the projects that were able to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. I'm not sure if you responded. There's a question around corruption and also balancing. How do we balance between using such evidence for advocacy and corruption and addressing the issue of corruption?
Okay, I'll try that. But once I give mine, I'll also request Agnes to step in and put a word in that. Yeah, I think the question was from Vicky from Save the World. The issue on community
response. Yes, from Save the Children. Save the Children.
Yeah, Save the Children. Okay, not Save the World. Yeah, Save the Children. Whereby for you to help, there's a lot of corruption involved in that. So maybe also just to find the evidence on corruption, because you need a long-term solution, whereby if you have these evidences on corruption, or even if you have that particular department or area where corruption is very common, you can try and generate some evidences which can be used to have that as a problem, identify that as a problem, and generate evidence regarding that, and use that to advocate for these to be sorted out. I'm just speaking from the research aspect, not from the practical, the grounds person. That's why I'm requesting Agnes maybe to step in and help with that. Thank you.
Maybe before you step in, corruption is something we always wonder. And in knowledge management, we always say, how can we change the culture? We have that question, and answering it has been a challenge. For corrupt persons, unless you are able to change that culture of corruption, it's really very, very difficult to connect it and get rid of it. So maybe we should find ways, we should find evidence or better ways of changing our culture and into corruptionless world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jennifer, and also Miss Lillian. I guess that is a catch-22 maybe, generating evidence around what has not worked and why. And if it is corruption, it's not easy to really bring the evidence. But let me give opportunity to Agnes, who is on the ground and who has been synthesizing most of these evidences. What do you say about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor and Lillian. You've thrown this to me, but I'll draw on my initial disclaimer, the fact that as a hub, we are not directly involved in evidence generation. So I do not have the first-hand experience with collecting evidence and being able to see that evidence around corruption and how to use it. But I want to borrow on knowledge that I have come across around the aspect of social accountability, the fact that the communities are the ones that will eventually benefit from the gains that come out of the programs on ending violence against children, how they can be involved and be part of the process of seeing that they take action in smaller ways at their level, using the structures that are in place around child protection. For now, that's what I can say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Agnes. I think in the interest of time, we would have loved to get additional more questions. However, our time was fast spent, and I don't see any other hand which is there. Yeah, so as we are moving towards the wrap up, I want to give back the microphone to the moderator, and then we'll invite our executive director to give a closing wrap up. Yeah, thank you. Back to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Moses. And would like to say a big thank you to our colleagues who shared questions. We had Vicky, I think we had Gloria, we had Mr. Kapuru, and all the other colleagues. Thank you so much for those questions that have enabled us to get better clarification from Professor and Miss Lillian. We shall move into our last session, which is really to just get our concluding remarks from Mr. Deogracia Siga, who is the Executive Director at Impact and Innovations Development Center. Welcome, Mr. Iga.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Flavia, the moderator. All participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating in this very lively and engaging conversation. Apologies for the technical glitch that we had somewhere in the middle. Technology will always do that at the time you least expect it to, but grateful that nevertheless we're able to continue with the conversation. I want to, in a special way, thank Professor Jennifer and Madame Lillian for the very engaging presentations that they've given us and for the very heavily loaded learning opportunity that they've given us this morning, stretching into the afternoon, to reflect on this very important theme of evidence, especially in the area of violence against children. We all know the enormity of the challenge that we confront dealing with the issue of violence against children. It's a huge, big issue. It's a challenging issue, preventing and addressing violence against children. We need enormous resources in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of expertise. We talk about the need for investment in being able to ensure that our children are safe. But for this investment to be attracted, we need to have evidence that our work is actually working, that what we are doing is making a difference. We need evidence to mobilize resources for what we invest. We need evidence to also account for the resources that we are given. We can't just continue getting money and doing things when we can't prove that they actually work. But above all, we need evidence to account to ourselves and to the children whom we serve that we're actually making a difference in their lives. So the issue of evidence generation and use is so central now to the work that we do. And I think it's increasingly being recognized that without evidence, we can't prove that what we are doing is making a difference and will not be able to attract the resources necessary to make a significant difference. So we now talk about evidence-based approaches, evidence-based programming. It's become very popular, and I think for the right reasons. I happen to be a member of the Global Inspired Working Group, hosted, co-hosted by WHO, where we are looking at promoting evidence-based interventions globally to address the issue of violence against children. And the debate is again focusing on the evidence, how is it generated, and how does evidence generation and use, play out in resource limited environments like here in Africa, in East Africa. But the consensus is, yes, we have to be evidence-based. What I see is the risk, and that's the learning from this conversation today, for which I'm very grateful to Prof. Jennifer and Madam Lillian, that probably there is a risk of oversimplification of this process of being evidence-based. That we think that when I get a piece of work, a research, and then I make reference to it in my program, then that makes what I do evidence-based. And I think the learning from today's conversation, is that being evidence-based is something much bigger than just doing research, one piece of research and making reference to it. I think for us at IIDC and the Barclays Hub, it's the beginning of a journey. We've been engaged in supporting partners become evidence-based, but this conversation really takes us to a new level in terms of what it actually means to be evidence-based in terms of programming, but also in terms of policy work. So we will continue along this journey with our partners, drawing from the learnings from today. At the Hub, we started somewhere. We need to start somewhere. So as Agnes said, we have started at just collecting what is there in terms of evidence. And so for now, the focus is on collecting, summarizing, making it available so that people can see it. But I think Madam Lillian has made it clear that that's not enough, that gradually we need to really think about synthesizing. And once again, thank you, our facilitators for today, and thank you, the team that has been behind this, and look forward to yet another opportunity to delve into this conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deo. Nidaisemo, I think all has been well captured, and we really appreciate you, colleagues, for joining us for this great webinar on prevention of violence against children in East Africa, with focus on evidence generation and use. We promise to share with you the presentations. We shall be sending out to your emails as we did earlier when we were sending invites. So be sure that you access all these presentations. And yes, thank you very much. We've been past our time, about 20 minutes past, but please bear with us. I think it's been a very fruitful and very engaging discussion. Have a good day for the rest of the day, and may God bless you. From the IIDC team, thank you very much.